Alex, thank you so much for taking the time. I just want to ask you what your experience was like before we started working together with Executive Offsites.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, John, as you know, I've kicked off a lot of major initiatives for a lot of different companies, and the goal was always to be kind of bold and innovative and to do big things. So I've done a lot of workshops, right, to kick off new things. And what we did together, to me, was the first one I've seen in my career that was truly differentiated. And the way that I would sort of articulate it is that most workshops, when you're sort of kicking off a large initiative, you as a leader have a tendency to want to focus on kicking off the business, right? And then you focus kind of on the business and the plan and trying to rally people around that. The approach that we did together, to me, in a very simple way, it started with the people and the team. And even though that sounds rather simple, it was pretty profound, because at the end of the day, having been through a lot of large projects, big companies, startups, with a ton of different innovators and consulting firms, what I know to be true is that it's not about the business or the plan, almost ever. And it really is about the team. So I think, the approach that we took together, which really emphasized starting with kicking off the team, and an approach that was very team-centric and actually even individual-centric, and aligning around that, as the beginning, was truly different.
And what were those profound moments or differences that you saw? What made it so profound?
Sure. So if you start with the mentality of the team versus the business, which, like I said, I think is the recipe to success for any new initiative, what you really get down to is it begins with aligning people's motivations, personalities, goals, objectives, and really not around the business at all, really around their personal lives and their careers, and just kind of how they work together. So kind of starting with that, how are we as a unit going to work together and think alike and sort of respect each other in a way that, frankly, we could tackle any business or any idea, right? If you kind of start with that notion. And my experience is when you don't start off those efforts, with the businesses that I've seen fail, it's because the team, starts to get going and they're really not speaking the same language right from the get-go. And it's that language not of the business strategy or the objective, that's basically the language of how do I operate. And that, the more you kind of go down the road on any initiative in that way, the more debt you accrue to execution. So to me, it's not about just team feelings or sort of making sort of team bonding. It really is a very practical value that you kind of avoid kind of inefficiency that starts from the get-go.
And those inefficiencies usually happen with the traditional way of doing offsites and going about business. And one of the things that we worked on a lot together were those blind spots that you and the team had. Can you touch on those blind spots a little bit? Because I talk about that a lot, and maybe folks can understand it more hearing from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like everybody kind of comes into any new initiative with a bunch of preconceived notions, and ways of thinking and ways of working that, like you said, create kind of these blind spots. And everybody usually, when you're looking at a really bold kind of new initiative, you've got a bunch of A types, right, that are getting into a room that have good experience, good history. That's why they're there. But the problem is when you bring people together like that, especially in large companies, the blind spots tend to be even larger. And so I think addressing kind of those blind spots early, especially amongst the senior leadership team, is incredibly important.
Great. Thanks, Alex. And the last question is for any senior executive watching this who has done it the same way, is really used to that way, and trying new things maybe is not the most convenient thing right now, given the high stakes, high risk. There's just a lot of pressure right now. What advice or thoughts would you have for that person considering doing an offsite a new way?
So I'd say a couple things. First, I'd say trust Joni. I think she knows what she's doing. The other thing I'd say is it really is that even though it feels like very different, if you just focus on this kind of difference between starting with the business, which you would typically do, versus starting with the team, and then you kind of turn your attention not to the idea of kicking off an initiative, but kicking off a team, then it really does seem really intuitive after that. But I think that's really more the thing that will feel uncomfortable at first if you're used to beginning things kind of rallying around a business strategy or a concept.
I do have one last question, Alex. What results have you received that are different from what you usually have experienced?
Sure. Yeah, when we started kind of this initiative that Joni and I were working on, it's, in my head, we were kind of like moving very quickly, right? And I thought efficiently towards from the get-go. And just in working with Joni, I realized, and I felt there was some things that I was concerned about, but and I had this kind of feeling in my gut that something was off. Joni was able to diagnose that kind of issue very quickly. And essentially enable us to kind of restart. And what I can say from that point on, is our productivity has accelerated, 10 times. So we are at the place where, meetings are incredibly efficient. People are all speaking the same language, are on the same page. The culture, kind of is getting to that point where it's infectious and kind of pulling in others. So I do think that there's been a market and sort of in my point very kind of tangible impact off of this kind of approach.
Great, thank you, Alex. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Jen.